Everybody, welcome to the Jayda InStitches show. Today on the show, I've got a classic baby blanket pattern for you. How classic? Well, it's the Sunburst Ripple Baby Blanket. It's beautiful, and you can make it as big as you want or as small as you want. The cool thing about this blanket is that unlike some of the other blankets and blanket stitches that we've done, this isn't worked in pieces. It's not worked back and forth. It's worked from the center out, which causes this beautiful bursting color effect, especially if you make it in stripes like I did. I just happen to have it on the craft room table. So let's go take a look at it, shall we? This ripple pattern blanket is worked from the center out. You use the first 6 rows to establish it, and then rows 7, 8, and 9 repeat infinitely until the blanket is as big as you like. You can stripe it like I did, you can make it in every color of the rainbow, and I've made one like that. If I can find the picture, I'll stick it in here. Or you can make it in one solid color. The beauty of this design is that you have these spiraling sort of little lacy eyelet stitches that spiral from the center outward and land in the center of the valleys and the center of the peaks. So you get this really beautiful spiraling, bursting color effect. I love this blanket. If you're new to the show and you're also new to reading patterns, then I've got a special gift for you guys. We've written this one up and it's up on our website for free. Just go to www.jaydainstitches.com, head to the pattern workshop page, scroll down until you find it, print it off, and come on back, and then we can stitch up this baby blanket together as you follow along the pattern with me. And to those of you who are comfortable reading patterns, this pattern has some extra tricks and tips for this particular baby blanket in it, which you might find really handy, especially if you're going to change colors or do something even more elaborate than the 2-color change that I've done. So, excellent idea to have the pattern handy, especially if you're going to take it on the road. So, without further ado, let's grab our hooks, grab our yarn, grab a cup of tea, and head to the craft table and make ourselves another baby blanket. In order to make our Starburst Ripple Baby Blankets, you're going to need 2 different colors at least. You can do this in as many colors as you like, and you can get that nice ripple effect happening. Like I said, I've made this in rainbow colors before, and it's just beautiful. But I've chosen 2 different colors today, and I'm going to need 100 grams of each of these colors. So it's a 200-gram blanket in baby weight yarn. And because I'm using 2 different colors, I need 100 grams of each color. I'm using a 4.25 millimeter hook, or a G6. You can also use a 4 millimeter hook if you like, because that'll make your stitches just a little bit smaller. You need a yarn needle, a pair of scissors, and we can get started. We're going to begin with a cinch circle. This blanket, unlike some of the other blankets we've done on the show, is made in the round, so it's made circularly, and you begin in the very center and work your way out. So there is our cinch circle. Now we're going to be working in double crochet, so in order to get up to the right height, we're going to chain 2 more, so that you now have a total of 3 chains coming out of your cinch circle. Into this cinch circle, we are going to work 11 double crochet. Your chain 3 here is going to count as a double crochet. So you're going to go ahead and work 11 more double crochets into that cinch circle. So at the end of this first row, you will have 12 double crochets. So a chain 3 and 11 double crochets equals 12. All right, I've got 12 double crochets, so a chain 3 that counts as a double crochet, plus 11 more double crochet stitches. I'm going to grab that little short tail and cinch that circle shut. There we go, nice and neat. And we're going to join our row to the top of that chain 3. So there's your chain 3, and you're going to slip stitch into the top. So don't use your short tail. you're going to slip stitch into the top of that chain 3, and that is row 1. So you with me so far? Now we're going to work on round 2. We're still working in double crochet. In fact, we're going to be working double crochet throughout the entire pattern. So we're going to chain 3 to start. And this chain 3 counts as a double crochet, and the chain 3 at the beginning of every row counts as a double crochet throughout this entire pattern. We're going to double crochet into the same stitch. So you see that little space there that you chained out of? You're going to work a double crochet right back into the same place. There we go. We're going to double crochet 2 times into each of the other stitches all the way around row 1. So at the end of row 2, you should have 24 double crochets. Now remember, you don't want to work, there's going to be like a little joiner space or an extra, what looks like an extra stitch. Some people call it the false stitch. You don't want to work that. So you want to remember to count. You're going to have 24 double crochet stitches all the way around for the end of row 2. And that is a multiple of 12. And 12 is the magical number in this pattern. So remember 12, you're going to have 12 points eventually in your Starburst ripple pattern. And as long as you've got a number that is a multiple of 12, you're doing the right thing. So remember 12, it's the magic number in this pattern. And we're on row 2. At the end of row 2, you should have 24 double crochets all the way around. All right, that's the end of row 2. I worked 2 double crochet into each stitch all the way around. I've got 24. This is that false stitch, or that funny little, what looks like an extra stitch that I was telling you about. Sometimes we work it, sometimes we don't, but counting counts. Your stitch count counts in this pattern. So if you've got 24, then you skip over that little spot, identify the top of your chain 3, and slip stitch into it to close off row 2. So row 1, 12 double crochet, row 2, 24 double crochet. Row 3, we're going to chain 3 to begin because we're still working double crochet. Chain 3 counts as a double crochet, and now we're going to sort of forget about it. So this we're going to come back to at the end of row 3, and we're going to start a new little pattern, but we're going to skip this. So we're going to come back to this. This does count as a double crochet, but just ignore it for now. So here's the pattern for row 3. Skip the next stitch. That would be this one right here. Identify the stitch after that. So you're working 1, 2 away from that chain 3 you made. Into this lucky little stitch right here, we're going to double crochet, chain 2, and double crochet. So we're working an extended V. So that's double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, all into the same stitch. Then skip a stitch. So skip right over top of this one, identify the next one, and do the same thing. Double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, right into that same stitch. Let's do it again. Skip a stitch, identify the next stitch, double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, all into the same stitch. So this is what it looks like. You've got, ignore your little chain 3 that you started with, you've got V, V, V. So you're making nice extended V's in every other stitch all the way around. And what does that mean? Well, it means you're going to have 12 V's, see there's the magic number 12, at the end of row 3. So go ahead, work double crochet, chain 2, double crochet into every other stitch all the way around for row 3, and then we'll finish off by using up that chain 3 we started the row with. All right, this is what row 3 looks like. I'm almost to the very end. I've put in my second last V, and now I'm back to the beginning. So here's that chain 3 we started with. I finished a V. I want to skip a stitch. The next stitch I work into is, interestingly enough, that sometimes false, sometimes fake stitch, but in this case, it's a real stitch. So we're going to double crochet into the base of this stitch, or if you want to be really particular about it, the top of that chain 3, but I like using the false stitch here, so I'm going to use that false stitch. So I'm going to double crochet, chain 2, and now I'm going to join with a slip stitch to the top of my chain 3. So there's 1, 2, 3. Top of the chain 3, slip stitch, and this is what it looks like. So blue on blue. I'll hold it in my hands. You've got what will become very defined little points, and they look like this all the way around. And you should count, you should have 12. So let's give it a go here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. 12! Magic number 12. And that was row 3. So now we're going to move on to row 4. Fancy that. And we're going to begin, interestingly enough, with a slip stitch. So we're going to slip stitch into that chain 2 space that we made, because things are going to change a little bit from now on. So we're slip stitching into that chain 2 space, and now we're going to chain 3. So you want to begin in that chain 2 space. Sorry, did I say chain 3? Chain 2 space. You want to slip stitch into the chain 2 space and then chain 3 to begin your row. So we're working in this chain 2 space from the previous row. So your chain 3 right here counts as a double crochet. You're going to double crochet into the same space, so you don't have to work a stitch anymore, just the space. Chain 2 and double crochet 2 times into the same space. So it looks something like that. There we go. So you slip stitched into that space, chain 3, that counts as a double crochet, and then you went double crochet, chain 2, double crochet into that same space. And you see how it makes that V much more defined now. So that is what we do all the way around for each chain 2 space. So you identify the next one, and you're going to work 2 double crochet, 1, 2, chain 2, and 2 more double crochet into the same space. So into each space all the way around, so every V, so ignore these other little things, you want the open V, into each of what is going to become a sunburst point all the way around for row 4, you want to work 2 double crochet, 2 chains, 2 double crochet into each of these chain 2 spaces from the previous row. So 2 double crochet, chain 2, and 2 double crochet. All right. You can work 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet into each of your V spaces all the way around for row 4, and then we'll finish off together. All right, that is the end of row 4. So you begin in that chain 2 space with a full motif. So double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, double crochet. You do that into each of the chain 2 spaces all the way around. So you finish with a full motif, and that just leaves joining at the top of your chain 3 with a slip stitch. And here is where I am going to fasten off my beautiful turquoisey blue, and I'm going to join my white. So this is where I'm going to create my first stripe. So I don't need much in the way of a tail, and I'm just going to fasten that off. Great. I'm going to join my next color now. So for row 5, I'm going to join my white color, and I'm going to join in a chain 2 space. So every time I change colors, where it doesn't matter where I fasten off, I'm going to join in chain 2 space because I just find that easier. And it helps to remember what row you're on, which is another reason I actually like to color stripe things, because if I know I do every sort of stripe of color is 4 rows of crochet, then it's easy for me to count quickly. I can
If I've completed stripes, I know that's 4, 8, 12, and so on. So I'm going to join my yarn in a chain 2 space. The next 4 rows of crochet are going to be in white for me. So chain 3, because we're still double crocheting, and I'm going to work the same sort of large shell motif into this chain 2 space that we worked in this one. So a large mountaintop. So 2 double crochets, 2 chains, and 2 more double crochets, all into that same chain 2 space. And I'm just going to ignore sort of my little tails here for now. I'm going to just weave these in when I'm finished my blanket. You can work over top of them if you like, but I'm just going to ignore them for now. Alright, here's where the pattern changes a little bit. So for each row onward, you're going to be working a sort of mountaintop, I'm going to call that a motif, into the chain 2 spaces. And it may not always be 2 double crochets and 2 chains, but for the next couple rows it will be. But here's where it does get consistent. In order to go downhill to the valley and back uphill to the peak, or the little sunburst points, we have to start adding more double crochets. So we're going to double crochet into the very next stitch here. But in order to make sure that we always have that pretty little dip, so you need the valleys in order to have mountains, or in this case you need the little dips in order to have the sunburst peak, we're always going to skip the 2 stitches that always lean together. So there's always going to be 2 stitches, here they are here they are here, that lean together at the top to create that little A space. So you just boom, boom, skip over top of them and work directly into the next stitch. And since we're only on row 5, there's only 1 extra stitch per row, per up and down, that you have to think about. And once you get back to the chain 2 space, work 2 double crochets, chain 2, and 2 double crochets into that chain 2 space. Then you repeat. So we're going back downhill now. We want to work the very next stitch. That takes us very quickly to the bottom, or the little valley in between our peaks. So we skip over those 2 stitches, work the next stitch, and right after that one is a chain 2 space. So you work 2 double crochets, 2 chains, and 2 more double crochets. And it looks something like this. Oops, getting ahead of myself here. There. So you've got the peaks, and you've got the valleys happening. And why is that? Well, because whenever you skip over top of those 2 little stitches in the middle, I'm trying to get my little tail out of the way here, you will automatically make the 2 stitches that you've skipped kind of create a little space, and the 2 stitches that you've made on either side of it automatically lean together. And that's how you know that little A space is your valley. So go ahead, finish off row 5, and I will catch up with you again at the end. I'm just coming to the end of row 5 here. I've worked my last sort of peak shell motif into my last 2 chain space, and I want to make sure I get that downhill stitch, skip over the 2 middles that kind of create that little A shape there, and then there's going to be 1 more left because I joined my color in the chain 2 space, so I got to remember to work that last stitch there. Good. And then I just join with a slip stitch to the top of my chain 3. You always join every row with a slip stitch to the top of your chain 3, so that doesn't change. And then we're going to work on row 6. So now if you did not change color and you find yourself attached sort of right here on top of a sort of a skip stitch or a valley stitch, then slip stitch over so that you're at least on top of the middle one, because we don't want to interfere with our valleys. You always want to skip those 2 lower stitches. So the stitch at the bottom of the hills, you always want to skip because you always want to create that nice little A shape. But this row, we've got 1 extra stitch now on the downhill and the uphill. So you're going to work at least those 2 stitches before you get to your chain 2 space. So chain 2 space is still 2 double crochets, 2 chains, and 2 double crochets for this row. And now all you have to remember is that going downhill and going uphill, you've got 1 extra stitch to work. So you work double crochet into the next 2 stitches. And that brings us to the bottom of our hills. I'm going to move my little tail out of the way. So we want to skip the 2 bottom stitches. That's what's going to create our A. So skip, skip, go into the next stitch. And you can see right there, it's created that nice little A space. You work the next stitch, and that brings us back into the chain 2 space. And here's a little note, just in case you have trouble looking at your stitches. This almost looks like you've got 1 more stitch to work, doesn't it? Well, you don't. Remember that your stitch, so the chain sort of part of the stitch that runs across the top, is always a little bit off to the side. So it's really important to kind of keep an eyeball on the number of stitches in the row previous, and remember how many you have to work. So you always work the stitches that are away from the valley. So there's 3 stitches in this previous row. So you know you have to skip the 2 valley stitches, and that means you've got at least 2 you have to work. So as long as you can see that you've worked at least 2 going downhill, and remember, don't confuse them with the stitches you put in your chain 2 space. This is what gives you extra stitches for each successive row. But just try to remember that, okay, so there's 1, 2, 3, I skipped this one, there's 2, I've worked 2, okay, I'm good. I can work into my chain 2 space. So there's as much counting as there is eyeballing that goes on in crochet. We're in the chain 2 space. We're going to work 2 double crochets, 2 chains, and 2 double crochets. And that should set you up for the rest of this row. You work the first 2 stitches going downhill. And we're double crocheting all over. Skip the 2 stitches at the bottom of the hill. That's this one and this one. Skip over to the next one. You'll work 2 stitches going uphill. And then that brings you to your next chain 2 space. Work 2 double crochets, 2 chains, and 2 double crochets into it. So off you go. I'll see you at the end of row 6. And then we'll jump into row 7. And then we'll watch the pattern oscillate from there on out. Just coming to the end of my 6th row here. So I'm working my last 2 stitches that go downhill. And I need to skip over the last 2, which are the downhill or the bottom of the hill here, the peak, or the valley, the reverse peak, it's that A shape. So I've worked this one. Now I'm going to skip over and join with a slip stitch to the top of my chain 3, if I can find it. There it is. Okay. Alright, so just a little recap before we move forward. At this point, you've completed 6 rows. And I've changed colors. I'm going to change my color every 4 rows of crochet, so I have nice, thick, even stripes. And it's also good for another reason to change color because it helps you count really quickly. If you're not changing color, you might want to grab some safety pins and just mark your 7th row. So once you complete row 7, you're going to want to put like a little marker on it, because we're going to have a repeating pattern. So a 3-row repeat after this, because the first 6 rows of this blanket sort of establish your round, working in the round, sort of flat, circular thing with these cute little 12 points. This is the establishment. So the first 6 rows are establishing rows. And then from rows 7, 8, and 9 and onward, you're going to repeat rows 7, 8, and 9. So there's a 3-row repeater that you can do infinitely to make this blanket as big as you want. But from here on out, the pattern becomes 7, 8, 9, repeat, 7, 8, 9, repeat, 7, 8, 9. So rows 7, 8, and 9 will repeat and repeat and repeat, which is why it's helpful to have a little marker so that you can always kind of count and know where you're at. So if you mark row 7, then you'll know after rows 8 and 9, you have to repeat your 7th row again. So I know it sounds confusing, but it's not, and you'll probably be able to eyeball it as soon as you get comfortable with the pattern. That said, let us move on to row 7. So because I joined right on top of my little A space, I want to slip stitch next door into the next stitch, just so I'm not working a double crochet on top of my valley. So if you are joining your rows and you wind up joining on top of a skippable stitch, always slip stitch into the next stitch so that you can start where you need to. So we chain 3 to start. It's the same thing. That's this stitch here. So I'm going to work the next 2. Still double crochet. We're not varying away from double crochet. And we arrive at the chain 2 space. Now normally we work 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 double crochets. But this special row 7 and every third row after that is a special row. So instead of 2 double crochets, 2 chains, and 2 double crochets, you're going to work 1 double crochet, 2 chains, and 1 double crochet. So you can consider this a small peak or a small peak motif row. So you only work double crochet, chain 2, double crochet into each chain 2 space round. But you still work all the necessary stitches going downhill and going uphill, and you still skip the 2 stitches at the bottom of the hills because you still want to create that nice little A space. So there's nothing special you need to do down here for any other row. This will always be the same. Skip these 2 bottom stitches, double crochet immediately into the next one, work all the rest of the stitches back up the hill. That will bring you to the chain 2 space, but because we're on a special row, so row 7, or the special odd row, the 1 of 3, you're going to work a small peak motif. So only 1 double crochet, 2 chains, and 1 double crochet. So if you've got sort of stitch markers or maybe a pen and paper handy and you want to just sort of make note of that to remind yourself that from now on, every third row, so you just kind of keep in your brain row 7, 8, 9, and then you'll be back up to the first of 3 again. So it's like, think 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, kind of like you're dancing. Every sort of third row, you want to do a small peak motif, which is just the 1 double crochet. Alright, I'm just finishing the end of my 7th row, and I'm going to skip my last 2 stitches, join with a slip stitch the top of my chain 3, and I got to make sure that I slip stitch into the next stitch to start in the right place because I've joined at the bottom of 2 hills. Alright, that's a row 7, so I'm going to take a safety pin and I'm just going to run it between these last 2 stitches here and clip it on. And you can use a stitch marker if you've got it. Just pull up my loop here. But this way I've marked this row. So I know that this row is my 7th row, but more importantly it's the first of 3. So I'm going to work rows 8 and 9 exactly like a regular row. So that'll be, everything is the same except in rows 8 and 9 you work 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet into every sort of chain 2 space. So you're doing like a large motif or large peak motif. And once you get 2 rows up, so I'm going to change colors after my next row, I'll know that I sort of look back and go, oh, yeah, there's my marker, that was my row 1, I can take my marker out, and I know that the next row after that is going to be a small row or a small peak motif row. So I know it sounds a little confusing, but it's not. Basically, from here on out, you're going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. You're waltzing. This is sort of waltzing with your crochet hook. So every first of 3 rows, you'll do a small peak motif, which is double crochet, chain 2, double crochet into every chain 2 space. Everything else is the same. You work downhill, skip the 2 bottom stitches, work uphill. And the other 2 rows, so rows 2 and 3, in your waltz, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, every 2, 3 row is a regular motif. So 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet into that chain 2 space. And that's all you need to remember. I've already chained 1, or I should say slip stitched into my next stitch, so I can continue with row 8. So I chain 3. That counts for this stitch here, so I'm going to work into the next 2. I'm working uphill. That takes me up to my chain 2 space, and because this was the row 1 of my 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 waltz, I know that I'm back to a regular peak motif. So rows 8 and 9 are 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet into that chain 2 space. So there you go. I'm going to let you finish your waltz for row 8. And then I'm going to change color once again. I'll show you how to do that. I know you probably know by now, but I'm going to show you my change color. And then I'm going to let you guys go with your new waltz pattern. I am waltzing around the craft room as we speak. There's my 2 bottoms. I'll skip those. Skip over the next one. So remember, rows 2 and 3 of your 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 are regular peak motifs in that chain 2 space. So that's 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet. Okay, one more quick check-in before I leave you guys to waltz this pattern on your own. I'm joining my new color, which is my blue, in a chain 2 space because each of my colored stripes is going to be 4 rows wide. I've left my safety pin in on row 7 because that's the first of my 1, 2, 3 rows. Rows 8 and 9, or the next 2 rows after my safety pin or my marker here, are going to be regular peak motif rows. So that means that in every chain 2 space, I want to work double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, double crochet. On the 1 rows of the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, so after I finish this row, the next row will be a small peak motif row. It will only be double crochet, chain 2, double crochet in each of the peaks. And once I'm finished that row, I'm going to move my marker up onto that row, which will be up here, and then I'll continue from there. And like I said, we've got the pattern available on our website, so if you're a little bit confused, make sure you follow along. And that's it. So waltz away, and I will see you once I've got a few pretty stripes worked into my pretty little baby blanket here. Okay, I have finished my blanket, and I thought I would take this moment to give you sort of an unorthodox view of it. I've pinned it down to a large towel, and I have finished steam blocking it. I've covered steam blocking in a couple of other tutorials, and I have an actual whole tutorial on steam blocking, and I'll put that link in the description box below. So if you're wondering how to properly block your blanket, and that is to make sure that everything lies flat and there's no excessive ripples or waves in the actual fabric. So I've gone ahead and finished with the steam blocking, and I've left it pinned to this large towel so that it can dry flat, because I don't want to do all that steam blocking and then have it ripple back up on me. So here is the finished product. I wound up doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rows, or I should say 7 stripes, and each stripe is 4 rows, and I ended on a row 7, or a row 1 of 3 of my little waltz, and I used my safety pin all the way through. So remember that it's good to, once you do your 1 of 3 row, you mark it with a safety pin or a stitch marker, and that way when you do your next 2, you know that those are large peak or large motif peak rows, and then you do your 3rd one, which is going to be a small motif or small peak row once again, and then remember to move your pin or your stitch marker up to that row so that you always know where you're at in the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 dance. Anyway, that's it. That is the finished product, and it just looks so pretty, and I'm so happy with it.
I am so happy with the way this blanket turned out. I hope you had fun making one along with me today. And if you did make one, make sure to post your pictures to me. You can follow me on Instagram, Google+, and Pinterest, and you can send pictures to me on all 3 of those. You can also like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and share our videos with all of your crafty friends. That's it for this week, everybody. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. And I will see you again very soon on the Jayda InStitches show. So until then, stay safe, stay crafty, and have an awesome week. Bye, everybody!